think we are ready to get started. It's 6 o'clock. We've got, an hour with you all, so we want to be thoughtful and use it in the best way we can. My name is Angie Thompson. I am to be the facilitator for our time together tonight, and just helping to make sure that that we kind of run the technology and that we have time for questions and all that, kind of being the conductor, if you will, of the meeting tonight. We are here to talk about West Marginal Way Southwest. This is our virtual open house. Brad, could you move to the next slide, please? Great. So you all are here and in what we call listen only mode, because this is a webinar. So that means that you can't control the muting and the unmuting of your microphone, but we do have a period of time in the meeting where we want to be able to make space for people to ask questions or have comments. And so we've got a couple ways that we want to do that. Some of you may be really familiar with Zoom, but just good to have a reminder. If you have a question or a comment, you can type that in the chat. So if you look kind of at the bottom of your screen, there's a little bubble there that says chat. And if you click on it, there's a space for you to be able to type a question or a comment. There's also an option there for you to click all panelists or all panelists and attendees. And if you click on all panelists and attendees, then everyone who's on the webinar will be able, who's in the meeting will be able to see your comment. So we'd love for you to do that, just so that everybody can be really transparent and we know what everybody else is saying. The other way for you to ask a question or make a comment is to raise your hand. There's a virtual hand raising feature in Zoom, and then we can unmute your microphone. We'll let you know when it's your turn. We can unmute your microphone so you can speak. I thought maybe we would try that right now. So see the little hand, it looks like a hand, see the hand raise feature down there. Why don't you try clicking that just so we can check if it works? And I should see, oh, look at all the numbers, 12 people, 13, 15, 18. Okay, so there's people are trying it. So let's give it a minute and then we can lower all those hands. So we just wanted everybody to get a sense of what that's like. And so it looks like it works. So that's great. David, maybe if you could lower everybody's hands so we start fresh. When we are asking questions, we thought it would be helpful for us to, we don't know how many questions are going to be. So we thought if we kept the questions and comments to like 30 seconds, we can then get through everyone and certainly have time to come back to people if there's additional questions or comments that people have. We will try to get to all of them, but if we don't, you can send questions to westseattlebridge@seattle.gov to that email address. Okay. Brad, the next slide, before I get done with all of the logistics piece, before I jump into the agenda, I do want to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land, the territories of the Coast Salish people. We often do that when we're sitting together physically, but it feels just as important to make that acknowledgement when we're all at home or in our offices or wherever folks are. Okay, so let's talk about the agenda today. We're going to start with some context and background on West Marginal Way Southwest overall. We're going to talk a little bit about projects that are planned or that are completed, ones that are kind of already in the works. And then we want to spend a little bit of time talking about data and letting you know what SDOT knows about the data and the constraints and really what's being observed out on this stretch of West Marginal Way. Then we want to pause there, have a conversation with you about whether there's questions, comments around that data. We also want to tell you what we've been hearing from other people when we've had this conversation over the last couple of weeks. So we'll share a little bit about what we've been hearing and then open it for all of you to share if there are other things that we've missed or other comments that you want to make. Then we're going to jump into sharing the proposed designs for the southbound curb lane. What's the plan? We want to have time to hear your thoughts and comments, but we also, again, want to share with you what we've been hearing about those designs. So we'll kind of do that same pattern. And then at the end, we're going to wrap up with next steps so that you know what's coming and what we have in the next, weeks to months, what's coming. So that's the overall of our agenda. I'm trying to think if there's any other pieces that I needed to cover. We do have this meeting being closed captioned, so that's an option for folks if that's helpful for you. And we are also streaming this meeting on YouTube as well. So there's a live stream. Okay. I think what I'm going to do before we launch into this, hit the ground running, we're going to take a minute and pause. And Brad, I'm going to turn it over to you to do just a moment of reflection.
Good evening, everyone. We're trying out something new, but we know that, times are tough. It can be stressful. It's the end of the day, and we know people have been working all day, and that maybe being in a public meeting isn't your most favorite thing to choose. But we want to try something out so we can center ourselves and just relax and let some of the stress of the day fall off, and then we'll jump into the full presentation. This will only take a couple of minutes. So please join me for a minute of calmness and reflection. Please take a moment to sit comfortably and close your eyes. Take a deep breath in slowly through your nose and out through your mouth. Notice your breath filling your body. Imagine someone you love sitting in front of you, and in your mind, tell that person these words. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you be filled with peace. Breathe in and out. Feel your words and your energy filling your heart. Next, imagine someone that you may have challenges with, such as a coworker or a friend. Repeat the words from before in your mind. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you be filled with peace. Deep breath in and out. Now bring to mind other people in this world who may be in need of love, who may be in need of compassion, and in need of kindness. Repeat the words from before. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you be free from suffering. May you be filled with peace. Breathe in and out. Finally, think of yourself. Fill your heart with love and repeat these words. May I be healthy. May I be happy. May I be free from suffering. May I be filled with peace. Take a moment to relax and let these words fill your space. We all have the power to learn. We all have the power to grow. And we all have the power to love. We are all filled with possibility. We are all human. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. I'm going to move in here and make sure that we are going to. I hear a big echo. Is anyone else hearing that? Is that better, everyone? Sorry about that. Here to talk about it. Okay, let me try that again. Hello, everyone.
There you go. Good, Sarah.
I keep getting muted somehow. Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Zora.
All right, Sarah, we've got a little echo. Maybe try it again and we'll see.
Hello, everyone. Let's see if that's better. Sorry
That's
about
great.
that. All right. My name is Sarah Zora. I'm the Reconnect West Seattle Mobility Manager. So we will be talking a lot about West Marginal Way today. Our consultant team, communications and engagement team, we've decided to make a video showing some of the proposals that we are looking at to make on West Marginal Way. We wanted to make sure that people have a sense of where we are talking about in the whole corridor for West Marginal Way. So Brad, if you could play this, and then we're going to get into the presentation after.
Welcome to the virtual walking tour for the West Marginal Way Southwest Improvement Project. This tour takes place between the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center and West Marginal Place near the West Seattle Bridge. This busy West Seattle corridor is used by multiple modes of transportation. It serves as a major truck route, North Peninsula vehicle route, and regional bicycle network connection. Along the route, we'll visit 3 primary stops that have been identified for improvements. Improvements range from a new crossing signal to a 2-way protected bike lane. We start our tour at Herringhouse Park. The Herringhouse Park and parking lot are located across West Marginal Way from the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center. Currently, to access either the park or the Duwamish Longhouse from the opposite side of the street, you have to cross 4 lanes of high-speed traffic on West Marginal Way. This crossing is unmarked and does not have sidewalks on the Duwamish Longhouse side. To increase safety, the project plans to install a crossing signal, crosswalk markings, and a sidewalk on the Seattle Bridge at Way. The project team observed southbound speed on the lane back trail on the east side, west side of the street and increase safety. The project plans to install a crossing signal, crosswalk markings, and a sidewalk on the west side of the street. The sidewalk will run north from the Duwamish Longhouse to southwest Idaho Street. An interim signal will be installed in 2021. To reach our second stop on the tour, we'll keep to the west side of the street and head north to southwest Idaho Street. From southwest Idaho Street, the project is proposing to change the west side southbound traffic lane into a 2-way protected bike lane. This bike lane could connect to the existing Duwamish Trail on the east side of West Marginal Way. Potential uses for the west side lane, south of the Duwamish Trail connection, could be to continue the new bike lane to the Duwamish Longhouse or extend existing on-street parking or open the lane back up to traffic. All options are currently being considered. Our final stop is just south of the West Seattle Bridge at West Marginal Place. This location was identified because of its potential to increase safety by reducing speeding along West Marginal Way. The project team observed southbound speed and travel patterns from West Marginal Place. This is the spot on West Marginal Way where it changes from 1 lane to 2 lanes. It was observed that most drivers stayed in the inside lane on the east side of the street. Those drivers who wanted to travel at higher speeds moved to the west side curb lane to pass. To try and combat this high-speed passing habit, we lowered the speed limit from 40 to 30 miles per hour and installed 6 radar feedback signs. Even with these efforts, speeds on West Marginal Way remain excessive and continue to create a safety risk for other vehicles, freight, bicycles, and pedestrians along the corridor. To increase safety and create more predictable traffic speeds, we are proposing to maintain 1 travel lane southbound on West Marginal Way from West Marginal Place to South Alaska Street. Because southbound West Marginal Way is 1 lane under the West Seattle Bridge, the number of vehicles entering the southbound corridor is limited by the street width, bridge support structures, and railroad constraints. As a result of this existing bottleneck, maintaining 1 southbound lane only adds about 10 seconds to an average trip at peak traffic periods. We continue to work with residents, businesses, and freight along the corridor and encourage you to ask questions and provide feedback. You can contact us by calling 206-400-7511 or by emailing Senior Communications Lead Adonis Ducksworth at westseattlebridge@seattle.gov. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for being patient with us as we were figuring out a little bit of the lag of the video and my echoing. So yes, that video explains pretty well why we're here today. We really do think that West Marginal Way can be something of a different street. We recognize that it is a major truck street and a heavy haul route, so there are large trucks using this right of way. And we want to recognize that we understand there's a lot of business and freight need on West Marginal Way. We also know that there is a gap in the bicycle network route between the Duwamish River Trail to the West Seattle Bridge Trail if you're going over the Low Bridge. And that's an important part of our bicycle network that is not a good connection or an all ages and abilities connection at this time. So that is another opportunity about why we're looking at making roadway changes on the 0.6 of this corridor itself of the 2.5 mile long West Marginal Way stretch from West Marginal Place to the intersection at Highland Park Way and West Marginal Way. And also very important to the context of this project is that it is home to the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center. I will say that the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center has been advocating since 2009 to get safety improvements for accessibility and safety measures trying to get into and out of their cultural center. So this, unfortunate circumstance of the West Seattle High Bridge being closed has actually introduced an opportunity to be able to have SDOT afford to make those safety improvements that will be occurring for the Duwamish Longhouse to get better access to their facility. The major thing that we're trying to do is to ensure that the West Marginal Way and this 0.6 of a mile stretch are really moving predictably and safely for all modes that are using this roadway. If you go to the next slide, Brad. We do have a complete streets ordinance here in City of Seattle. In the first section, we really focus on planning for, designing construction projects that really are safe, predictable, appropriate places for people to walk, bike, take transit. And because freight is such an important corridor and a very huge part of the economy for the City of Seattle, if there are proposals on major truck streets, we really have to make sure that we're not impacting freight mobility or capacity issues or needs for freight on any major truck street with any proposal that we're doing. So Brad right here will be going over a lot of the analysis that SDOT has been doing, our design team has been doing, and really focusing on safety aspects of the street, safe and predictable for any user on the roadway, if you're in your car, if you're walking, if you're biking, and really have safe, accessible access to the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center. With that, I will mention that we do have two different kind of frames of mind right now. So the confirmed projects that are definitely going forward with this project are the Duwamish interim crossing signals. So we're going to do an interim built in 2021, and then the permanent condition will be built in 2022. In conjunction with that intersection crossing treatment, as you can see, it's just to the north of Herring's House Park, the parking lot. That's going to be where the interim signal is, and then there's going to be a sidewalk path on the west side of the street to really connect into the Duwamish Longhouse. Right now, as you can see on the picture on your screen, it is just a dirt pathway, and we really have the desire to get an ADA accessible route from the Herring's House parking lot to the Duwamish Longhouse. With that, if you go to the next slide, Brad will now take over on talking about some of the analysis and data and constraints that we have seen on the corridor. And then after that, we're going to stop and pause and see if you guys have questions or comments about the analysis portion. Go ahead, Brad.
Cool. Thank you very much, Sarah. Again, welcome everybody. So diving into kind of what have we seen out on the corridor and what do we see today? West Marginal Way is one of the detour routes for the West Seattle High Bridge. When we look at the changes from pre-COVID and pre-bridge closure, so February of 2020, you can see that traffic volumes have increased a substantial amount by 113% over the winter. And last summer, we were even seeing values as high as 150% higher. That being said, West Marginal Way was one of the lowest of all the 12 corridors that we have been monitoring. It had almost the lowest volumes before that, and so hence why the percentage jump is so high. When we look at it today compared to all of the other locations, we see that it sits right around the middle of all the different major detour routes that we are tracking in the West Seattle and SOTO area. Since our proposed projects are primarily impacting the southbound travel lane, we're showing a lot of the data is going to be southbound specific. And so what we're seeing in terms of current volumes out there today is we see about 1,000 vehicles an hour during the peak travel periods, during kind of the AM rush hour and the PM rush hour. That being said, it's pretty much does kind of plateau throughout the rest of the day, or throughout the middle of the day. You know, on other corridors, you tend to see higher peaks during those rush hour periods, but out here, the volumes have kind of been spread out pretty evenly throughout the day. Because it's a major truck street, we're also looking at truck volumes out there on the corridor, and we're seeing, again, you know, decently high volumes of trucks out there compared to other corridors. It's a major truck street. We're seeing the majority of trucks in the northbound direction, but still a decent amount in the southbound direction, still following that same pattern where they're kind of being spread out throughout a lot of the midday. And so those volumes are kind of being balanced throughout the day. We have been looking at speeds out there as well. This is partly due to the city's citywide speed limit. We've been doing citywide speed limit reductions as part of some of the mayors and our safety initiatives. But in addition to that, because of the Longhouse out there and the ability for pedestrians and bicyclists and all modes, including people who choose to drive and things like that, we know that slower speeds are safer streets. And so we've collected data at 3 different time periods over the last year, and we've done several different things. And so in April 2020, we collected data and then we installed new speed limit signs to reduce the speed from 40 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour. And then we came back later, we collected data after that, and we came back later and then installed radar feedback signs, the little signs that blink and flash and show you your speed. And so if you look at the top right graph, you can we took 3 different locations along the corridor. Dakota is in the north end of the corridor, so that's between the Longhouse and the West Seattle Bridge. Alaska Street is right at the West Seattle, or right at the Longhouse, and then Front Street is closer down towards Highland Parkway. And what we saw was that the speed limit signs in general didn't have as high of an impact out here as we've seen in other corridors. In other locations around the city, we did some pilot projects in 2018 for our speed limit reductions, and we saw that if we can reduce speeds by about 4 to 6%, we can get a reduction in collisions of 20 to 40%. So small changes in behavior lead to large gains in safety. And so when we went out here and we looked at the after data from the speed limit signs alone, we saw that they had a low impact, probably due to the fact that there's not a lot of intersections, actual major intersections in this corridor. There's not a lot of pedestrian generators. There's not a lot of things that signal to people who drive on this corridor that you should drive slower or anticipate something in the roadway. But when we've added the radar feedback signs, we did see that additional reduction of 4 to 11%, depending on the location. Front Street saw the biggest change because they were seeing some of the highest initial speeds out there, and some of the other locations saw a more reduced. But we saw a bigger change in speeds, which from a safety perspective, we would expect collisions to go down and safety to be better because of that. And then if we specifically look at Alaska Street, the chart on the bottom, we looked at, here's a unique circumstance where because if there's an existing lane drop out there, there's an existing single southbound lane, and there's 2 northbound lanes, we see slower speeds in a single lane than in 2 lanes. And this kind of confirms what we see on a lot of other projects, based on a lot of national data as well, that when you're in a single lane, right, the most conservative driver kind of determines the speed. But when you have 2 lanes, people who want to drive more aggressively or pass or things like that, they can kind of push the speeds higher. And so we see a lot of safety benefits with the single lane. And what we're seeing here in the data is we're seeing slower speeds with a single lane, but still considerably above the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. So that also kind of conveys to us that we're getting a safety reduction. We're getting a safety improvement with the speed limit reduction. But people are still traveling essentially at speed out there and still traveling along the corridor without delay, even in the single lane at Alaska Street. So diving into the single lane at Alaska Street, we we refer to this as the Wamish Longhouse lane drop. This was installed in 2019, specifically kind of for the purpose of the Longhouse. At the time, we have been working on the signal improvement, but that takes a few years for us to really build that up and do all your utility checks and all of our coordination. And so we wanted to install something initially that kind of provided some benefit in the near term. So this has helped improve sight lines at Alaska Street and also allowed us to provide some additional on-street parking directly in front of the Longhouse. So people who are visiting for events or, they have school buses do field trips out there, they had a space to safely pull over and park to access the Longhouse. So looking at Alaska Street, we've got the Longhouse on the bottom. We've got Alaska Street in the middle, and then kind of looking to the north, there's kind of a curve in the street. There's a curve. There's several curves in West Marginal Way, but this specific point has several screen lines which kind of block people's view who are exiting Alaska Street. So you've got a tree line screen, and you've got a chain link fence screen, which both of those make it very difficult to exit the Longhouse. We looked at two different positions here. So position 1 was kind of the prior condition where you had 2 southbound lanes. And then number 2 is the kind of what we see out there today. We have a lane drop. And so people exiting that Alaska Street to turn onto West Marginal Way can pull out a little further to see a little further down the corridor, anticipate people approaching from the south. This is what we see today. So position 1, again, if the lane drop wasn't there and you had 2 southbound lanes, that's about as far forward you could pull as a driver. And so you really can't, it's very hard to see traffic except for the traffic that's very close to you, especially in that curbside lane. There's a little slot between the trees and the fence, but having been out there and driven this myself, it's very difficult to see. Position 2, still you have some of that tree screen line and that chain link fence, but much more improved visibility out there. And so kind of putting on our engineering hat here and actually looking at the numbers, we have some equations to kind of help us equate that, a certain distance that you can see down the road as a driver can equate to, how fast you can stop. So what we see is that in position 1 with 2 southbound lanes opening, you have very limited sight distance. You can't see very far. So a driver that would be driving south, in order for them to safely stop, they'd have to be traveling at 27 miles an hour or slower between the time that you nosed out and they stopped. And then position 2, we get much more sight distance. Vehicles can see further down the corridor. So people traveling south have, it's much easier for them to see a vehicle pulling out. And it's much easier for those vehicles to look up to the north and see southbound traffic. So in that case, vehicles traveling at 43 miles an hour can safely stop if they see a vehicle pull out or a vehicle until they see them. And so 85% of the people are driving 43 miles an hour slower. To illustrate this is kind of some of the footage the Longhouse has provided us. And so this is the old circumstance where there's 2 southbound lanes, really limited visibility, where it's really difficult for people exiting that space to see drivers coming from the southbound direction. And we kind of end up with circumstances like this. Again, when we have those dual lanes, we still see even higher speeds. So a vehicle traveling 40 miles an hour plus in that curbside lane makes it very difficult for anyone exiting that driveway to see how fast those vehicles are, or even see vehicles are approaching at all. Oops. Okay. Looking a little further north on the corridor, so this is kind of near Dakota Street. We have been looking at how many vehicles are using the southbound lanes. And what we're seeing today, again, I should also point out, looking at the volumes, we are seeing historically high volumes out here. But what we're seeing at the same time is that for the most part, single lanes are handling these historically high volumes without too much delay. And so we've gone out there and done some additional counts, looked at which vehicles are using which lanes, and we see that about 80% of vehicles in the southbound direction are already using a single lane. So that curbside lane is already underutilized, and then based off of our observations, the majority of vehicles that are using that curbside lane are using it for high-speed passing in between the Chelan 5-way and that lane drop in front of the Longhouse, which again, more risky and aggressive behavior, increases our risk factors and decreases safety. And we're seeing most people already single file in a single lane today. When we look at travel times on the corridor, right, so the amount of time it takes you to get from A to B, When the bridge closed, we did see that big jump, right? We saw that because of at the Chelan intersection and the Chelan 5-way and the Highland Parkway intersection, we have as SDOT gone back and repaved some of those and restricted turns and phase those traffic signals to try to be as efficient as we possibly can. But it's just difficult. But those are kind of our bigger constraints. And so what we saw with the bridge closure was we saw an increase of about 25 to 10% or 10 to 25%, depending on the AM or PM period. So 1 to 2 minutes of additional travel time, essentially between Harbor Avenue and the First Avenue Bridge. With our proposal, so with a single southbound lane and the Longhouse signal installed, there's the potential that at the worst periods, you'd see about a 10-second delay, but that would be much less if not closer to 0 off of the peak periods. Looking at some of our constraints today, and I've been trying to follow the chat a little bit, but I've seen people talking about kind of the lane drop today and how you kind of have existing 2 to 1. And so this is what we have today. We have 2 lanes coming off of the Chelan 5-way, which merge to a single, which then open back up to 2, which then merge back in front of the Longhouse, and then open back up to 2. We do have those constraints. The Chelan 5-way is kind of that's kind of releasing our queues, or what we call platoons of vehicles or groupings of vehicles. That's kind of metering the corridor for the most part, as well as the fact that at Highland Parkway, especially during peak periods, people are traveling south and they're ending up having to sit through several cycles. So what we may be seeing today is that those big major intersections are the biggest constraints on the system and have the highest, basically have the lion's share of the impact to how long it takes you to travel along that corridor. Looking at the Chelan 5-way and kind of going towards West Marginal Place, essentially going under the West Seattle Bridge today. This is kind of our major constraint for the corridor. We have bridge supports in this area, we have active rail lines, and then we have this kind of very limited area where it's restricted at West Marginal Place. Where on the photo on the right, you can see a single southbound lane. This is basically our limiter for the corridor. So what we're seeing out there is that you could have multiple lanes traveling southbound, but we're never going to be able to get rid of that single southbound lane in the near term, right? It's probably going to require a new West Seattle Bridge and moving the rail, and or potentially demolishing that property there, none of which we are actively considering in the next few years. And so at this point in time, this is kind of the limiter and probably the biggest determinant of how long it takes for you to travel along the corridor, is that you're already in this single lane at West Marginal Place. Diving into some of our safety and crash analysis that we've been doing, we've looked at this specific stretch from West Marginal Place down to Puget Way, which is just a little south of the Longhouse. Again, this is just looking at the north 0.6 miles of the West Marginal Way corridor. The whole corridor from the Chelan 5-way to Highland Parkway is about 2.5. So we're looking at about 20% of the corridor here. What we've seen, especially in 2020, was that while on the citywide level, we have continued to see trending downward of collisions over time. In this specific section, we've seen collisions trend upward. Most notably in 2020, we kind of saw collisions go up here, while citywide they went down. If we dive deeper into the types of collisions we're seeing, on the right, we're seeing a lot of mid-blocks collisions are happening, while typically on corridors, you see a lot more intersections collisions. Again, because there aren't any major intersections in the middle of the corridor here, you don't have tons of major turns or other signals that are controlling those. We see a lot of mid-block collisions. And when we look at those, we see a lot of high-speed related collisions. So we see rear-ending, we see side swipes, and then we see what's called fixed object collisions, which is, those are basically vehicles running off the road, which is usually related to high speed or distraction or both. And so we know that with some of these things we're proposing, we believe that this can help reduce some of these higher speed collisions. We have been asked to look at the Terminal 5 project, and they have released their environmental impact statement. I should preface that this was released in 2016, so the numbers may change a little bit based off of the current high. We wasn't anticipating a high bridge closure. And so, but we have looked at what's available to us and what the port has provided us. And what we're seeing is that before T5 is currently under construction today, but before they were closed down, they were during the peak periods in the southbound direction, there were about 8 to 10 trucks an hour using West Marginal Way. And if I were to point back to that original slide I had about average daily traffic, when we were seeing 1,000 vehicles an hour, that only constitutes essentially, a fraction of a percent of the traffic we're seeing today. The West Seattle High Bridge is expected to open in 2022. So that'll be kind of in between the Terminal 5 opening. So Terminal 5 will be partial capacity at the end of this year in 2021. Then the High Bridge will open, and then we'll see full capacity for Terminal 5 in 2023. With the full capacity, Terminal 5, again, the environmental impact statement from the port on Terminal 5 said that they'd see only an additional 3 southbound trucks during those peak periods. So instead of 8 to 10, you'd see 11 to 14 vehicles in those peak hours. So again, we're saying that the impacts from T5 are going to be pretty small, even if there's bigger shifts related to the High Bridge closure. These numbers are much smaller as compared to kind of what we see. Even our day-to-day traffic volumes, we can see those swing in the peak hours of 100 vehicles. It can be 100 vehicles more on a Wednesday than there are on a Thursday. And so we think that our analysis has kind of encapsulated within it kind of these extra additions from T5. And so kind of what have we heard? We have been meeting with the Freight Advisory Board. We've been meeting with the port. We have been reaching out to stakeholders along the corridor. There's a maritime town hall, which includes stakeholders in this corridor, along with many others who are involved in the maritime industry. And so what we're hearing in terms of some of our modeling and analysis is that the preferred design needs to consider the most updated predicted freight volumes from the opening of T5, as well as the ability to accommodate additional freight. We've also heard about future traffic predictions needed to model the extension of SR 509 south of the SeaTac Airport and how it will impact traffic flow in this corridor, as well as the analysis should consider the impact on alternative routes in the area if trucks elect to take a different southbound route because of the reduction to a single lane. In terms of other additional analysis, SDOT should study and report the bike and pedestrian traffic on West Marginal Way Southwest, as well as a detailed safety analysis needs to be completed for all of the options before a decision is made. This analysis should show the potential impacts of introducing a two-way protected bike lane into a single signal-controlled intersection. I'm going to hand this back over to Angie.
Great. So Brad has shared, okay, we've divided this section into, we've divided the presentation into a couple pieces. So we talked a little bit about the data. And so wanted to share with you what we've been hearing and then make space to hear some additional comments, questions that you all might have. And so we are going to have time and talk more about the proposed design. So we're kind of trying to parse it a little bit here. I have one person who has raised their hand. There have been a lot of comments in the chat, so we may try to do some summary of those. But I see Robert Madell. You have raised your hand, and so we want to give you the chance. So you need to unmute yourself, and then you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for putting this together. I completely can sympathize with the bikers who want more safety, and I completely agree with safety, but this just feels like a Band-Aid and a diversion. Most of these projects, these problems will be fixed a lot when we get the bridge fixed, and you can probably do whatever you want on Marginal Way, and 90% of the people on this call won't really care after the bridge is fixed. This is the wrong project at this time, and this is going to sound facetious, but it's completely true. The engineers working on this project should be like the personal assistants of the people working on the upper bridge, because that should just be SDOT's #1 priority. I shudder to think about the time lost from everyone in West Seattle who has to waste time going around because that bridge doesn't work. It's killing us, not killing us, but it's a massive inconvenience. And like, it doesn't seem like we're getting this instead of this is everything we're doing to fix the upper bridge. Like, it's ridiculous. absolutely infuriating, I think, to me, and I'm sure to many of the other people on this call.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for your comment. I've got kind of a list here, and then they're changing around a little bit. Kate Wells, you are the next person on our list, so you can go ahead and share your comment or question when you're ready.
Hello. So cars enter this area from the north in one lane. Do you know about how much traffic enters West Marginal between the Chelan intersection and the Longhouse from the businesses along the way?
Sure. I think that it's kind of like this almost closed environment, right? Where vehicles, there's no other side streets between those intersections. You have to enter and leave through the Highland Parkway and the Chelan 5-way, at least as a person driving, right? And so it is kind of a closed circuit. We do have some of the driveway numbers from some of the businesses, but by far and foremost, I mean, most of the vast majority of vehicle traffic on West Marginal Way is through vehicle traffic.
And it's not added in that section.
No, there's nowhere to add vehicles from. It's
Okay.
not like if we're looking at a different corridor where you have side street, you can take like a different route to get into that space. These are the only two, it's this closed circuit space where you can only get into the space as a vehicle from Highland Park and Chelan. So the numbers we show up there, they essentially kind of represent what we see throughout the whole corridor. Yes, it varies from day to day based on weather. And yes, there are, there are vehicles using driveways that are changing in and out, but the we're seeing pretty consistent numbers along the corridor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Kevin S. I don't know how many Kevins there are, but Kevin S., you are the on our list. So go ahead and unmute yourself and speak when you're ready.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. So I agree with the earlier comment that any restriction on this street at this moment is really a bad idea, because the amount of time it takes to drive around that way adds a significant amount of time to everyday travel. And I understand the need for some safety, but instead of trying to further restrict lane usage, I think the better view might be to look at how do we increase capacity while maintaining safety. And to take away yet another lane and give it to the bicycles. While I understand people want bicycle lanes, I'm all for building bicycle lanes. Let's start taxing the bicycles. And as soon as they generate a big enough revenue stream that they can reliably afford to pay for bicycle lanes, then have them build those. But we have given up tens of millions of dollars of street lanes that 99.999% of the taxpayers have paid for use for a very, very, very small number of people. And to continue doing that on this stretch of road, which has dramatically increased its traffic, is wholly the wrong idea at this point. Someone said earlier that once the West Seattle Bridge is back up and working, then it might make sense to do something at that point. But right now, this is, in my mind, completely the wrong move. And if you live up here in Northwest Seattle, like I do, I'm be willing to bet the vast number of people on this call agree with me that any further restriction to this use of roadway is absolutely the wrong move. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that folks are I know there's a lot that people want to share, but we've got about 9 folks who are in the queue to want to ask questions, and so I'm going to try to ask people to keep moving on their comments. Brett Moore, you are the next person on our list. So Brett, go ahead and you can go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment when you're ready.
Okay. I'm just going to agree. I think it's a nice idea and a horrible time for it. I think, what we see right now is highly inconvenient. What we're going to see when we clear COVID and when people start commuting to the office, because most people are not right now, is going to be just a landslide and tenfold of the delays that we're seeing right now. And anything that's not focused on helping that problem, I think is the wrong focus at this moment in time. And, you know, we could look at this thing, you know, later when we've got another way to get out of town. And also I'm curious about the truck analysis, because, you know, my experience has been that, you know, they come in waves, and that tends to really change the dynamics quite a bit in terms of when a ship is unloading. And the docks have been relatively less active lately, but that's probably going to change too. So I'm just, again, it's all about timing. Thanks.
Thanks, Brett. Don Brubeck, you are the next person on our list. So go ahead when you're ready and make your comment.
Thank you. I think now is actually a really good time to be doing this project to deal with the closure of the West Seattle Bridge. I ride my bike on this route. I drive this route a lot. My daughter is going through cancer treatments and is going to be making daily trips to downtown along West Marginal Way, First Hill, by car. And traffic is going to get worse, as people have said, after the pandemic effect is over and before the bridge is open. And freight really should be the priority on this street, and other uses should be accommodated. But the choke points, the capacity problem is at the bridges. It's not on the north end of West Marginal Way. It's at Highland Parkway and at the First Avenue South Bridge. So all these people speeding here, who sometimes have crashes that shut down the road for hours at a time, are just speeding to get into a traffic jam at Highland Parkway and leading up to the bridge. They're not gaining anything by going faster here, and they wouldn't be able to go that fast if there was a capacity problem. So the bridge closure, dealing with the bridge closure really relies on getting more people out of private cars who are able to do that. And more people would get onto bikes to cross the bridges on the bike lanes over the bridges instead of congesting the car lanes, if it was safe and convenient to ride a bike along there. So this choke point at the north end of West Marginal Way, on a short stretch of it, could be a way to improve safety by slowing down cars where they're going too fast, reducing crashes, improving safety at the Longhouse, and making it more convenient for people to ride a bike, more safe for people to ride a bike instead of drive if they're going to Georgetown or downtown, or if they're going from South Park to the Spokane Street Bridge by bike. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Okay, we have a few more folks. We may not be able to get to everyone who has their hand raised, but you could be first on the list when we get to our next comment section. I did want to just take a minute and let everyone know that in the chat, we're keeping track of all of those comments, and we're recording all of those. They're not really being answered in real time, but we are documenting them, and we're going to post a meeting summary on the website as soon as we can. Okay, Larry King, you are the next person on our list. So go ahead and ask your question or make your comment. Larry, are you there? Okay, we can't hear you, Larry. You have to unmute yourself if you haven't done that. So.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question. Are you planning to do this before the West Seattle Bridge opens?
Right now, I will get into that, but yes, we would be planning for that in 2020.
Well, I agree with everybody else. With construction and everything, it's going to be a mess down there. And I travel that way quite a bit. And it's going to increase time, everything. I think it would be, you want to do this, wait till the bridge is open where the traffic cuts back, because everybody will be going over the bridge. Plus, use some of that money for the bridge instead of putting in bike lanes right now.
Thank you, Larry. Next comment we have, and I may say it wrong, I think it might be Jeannie Felon. You can tell me the right way. Go ahead, Jeannie. Oh, we can't hear you if you are talking. You're muted. Why don't you try it? There you go. Try now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I like Don. I both bike this route and drive this route. And so I have interest in both of them being efficient and safe. And I honestly am trying to look at the benefit of the bike lane versus keeping it a car lane. And keeping it a car lane, there seems like such a little benefit to widen it out to 2 lanes for such a short amount of time. I never go in that right lane when I'm driving because there's no reason. I have to merge over anyway. So there's very little value of that lane for car traffic, but for bike traffic, it is an immeasurable improvement on safety because right now that sidewalk is so narrow and you cannot navigate it with 2 bikes passing each other. So I'm just looking at it, that 1/4 mile stretch of where it's 2 lanes. What's the value to a biker versus a car? And it far out, in my mind, the value far outweighs for biking, making it a bike lane. And I understand the frustration with car drivers. I think we're all frustrated as West Seattleites. I'm frustrated too. But it's really where I get frustrated is the Highland Park interchange and the First Avenue Bridge opening and closing. So it's not this 1/4 mile area. So I understand everybody's anger, but I think let's, think about, do you really use that right lane? And how much does that benefit you as a driver versus would you use that right lane as a safe bike lane as a biker? So that's how I look at it. I advocate for a bike lane. Thanks.
Thank you. Next on the list is, and so we're going to be able to keep doing with questions here until 6:55, and then we're going to move to the next part of the presentation and we'll have more questions again. So Benita B, you are the next on the list. So go ahead and unmute yourself and you can say your comment.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, like many of the others that have spoken before with the closure of the West Seattle Bridge, this is not the right time to be doing construction down there on one of the few routes that people have to get in and out of West Seattle. The question that I have is, where are the cyclists coming from and going to that you expect to use this route? And what's the current data on how many cyclists there are now?
Sure, I can talk about that a little bit. The next few slides will kind of get into directly the routing, but this is a gap in the bicycle network today. There's the Duwamish River Trail south of near the Longhouse that goes all the way down to Highland Parkway that takes you over the First Avenue Bridge. And then just to the north, kind of under the High Bridge, you have the West Seattle Bridge Trail that connects. So what the last person commenting was kind of talking about was that the sidewalk is narrow and that today we see bicyclists using the sidewalk. In terms of volumes, we don't have great numbers on the bike volumes out there today, but we do know that they're low compared to maybe other downtown locations. But at the same time, as a city, we are, our Complete Streets ordinance is telling us to provide safe and reasonable accommodations for all users, and that's what we're trying to do with this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Benita. Okay, so next on our list is Kathy Dunn. Kathy, go ahead and unmute yourself. We probably got time for Kathy and then Bruce follows after that. So maybe 2 more questions and then we'll keep moving, but we'll keep track of who had their hands raised. Kathy, go ahead.
Hi, this is Kathy Dunn. I have a question about the sidewalk improvement. Is that going to connect all the way from where the current crossing, pedestrian activated crossing is all the way to the Longhouse so that you could walk from the bridge all the way to the Longhouse and without crossing West Marginal Way twice?
Yes, I feel like I briefed over that slide and cut Sarah off. I didn't mean to do that. So in the yellow section here, that's the sidewalk connection that would go all the way down to the Longhouse. Today, what's existing is everything north of that yellow line. So you can walk from you can walk from Del Ridge through the Chelan 5-way and then down West Marginal Way to what's shown here as the Duwamish Trail signal. And then the sidewalk ends and we end up with this picture on the right here, what we call like a goat path. And
Okay,
so we would
yeah,
build the trail in that
cars
section.
have been allowed to go along there willy-nilly, throwing rooster tails on people walking. Bikers have to share with pedestrians. The Duwamish people, we're on their land and we should respect them and their wishes, which is to make it possible for people walking, biking, and driving to get to safely, all of them safely to their location and to enjoy the cultural resources there.
Thanks, Kathy. Bruce, you are next on our list. So I'm gonna let you unmute yourself and then go ahead and make your comment when you're ready.
Hello, this is Bruce, and I would like to have a couple of questions answered. Is there not a walking path or bike path to the east side of Marginal Way? Why don't we improve that to make that a far safer walking and bike path? That completely separates people from the cars. And two, down at the Longhouse, why don't we put an actual traffic signal in there so you can get in and out of the Longhouse safely there, and then get it back to 2 lanes? And let's spend some time and effort trying to get the Highland Park Marginal Way fiasco straightened out. We cannot be spending all this money on bikes when last I heard bike ridership in Seattle was down double digits. Approximately, I heard last 23%. And if it's going down, which it's been for a number of years, why are we still spending money like this on something that is having reduced people on it? And when we get back to full employment, I don't think we're going to have as many people biking because it's going to be working from home. Thank you very much.
Bruce. Hey, Brad, I wondered if there's like a quick answer to some of this piece and then move into the designs, because it feels
yes.
like a question
I do just want to touch on the signal location, because this has in the past been a point of confusion, and reasonably so. And so in the diagram on the right, you can see the Longhouse on the lower left bottom next to Alaska Street. But where we're actually proposing the signal is at the driveway to Herring's House Park. And that is very specifically because of the rail tracks out there. They're controlled by BNSF, and they at this point do not allow for what they deem new crossings. So if we were to build a pedestrian rail, you have to cross the rail tracks to get to the Duwamish Trail on the east side in that location. That's a new crossing, and they say we don't allow new conflict points. You can only modify existing ones, or you can remove other existing conflict points, meaning shutting down driveways other places along the corridor. We've looked at that. What made the most sense and was the most cost effective for us, and that didn't require us to shut down other driveways to businesses, was to modify the existing driveway at Herring's House, and we're going to widen that a little further. We have an interim design where we're going to have to utilize part of that driveway, but in the long term we're going to widen that to provide more pedestrian space. And so that limits what we can do at Alaska Street, because we're already going to have this signal and all this infrastructure up there. I will go ahead and move on. Apologize for backtracking.
Adjusting your presentation, I want to let Amanda, Jim Jacobson, Crystal, and Andrew G know that we have them on the list, and they'll be the first ones that we start with in the next question section.
Great. Thank you. So diving into kind of our proposed designs here, these are the 2 areas we're looking at. So everything from West Marginal Place south to the Longhouse. You can see the existing bicycle trail connections kind of in a light blue. So we have the West Seattle Bridge Trail to the top, and then we have the Duwamish River Trail at the bottom, which today crosses from east to west at the Duwamish Trail signal and then uses the existing sidewalk out there. And so we're, again, this is also just the top 0.6 miles of the whole West Marginal Way corridor. Everything south of the Longhouse at this point, we're not looking at changing the configuration south of there. So there's still almost, 1.5 miles to 2 miles of roadway between here and the Highland Parkway intersection. So looking at the area, we're deeming section 1, we have 2 options, either a no build option, so maintaining what's out there today, or a build option, so converting that southbound curb lane into what we call a 2-way protected bike lane. We've looked at 4 different alternatives. So one of the last questions was asking about why don't we keep this on the east side, and I'm happy to kind of talk about that a little bit here. So we looked at these 4 locations as to where to place the bike facility. And so if we start with D, if we start on the right side and we look at D, an off-street trail, currently today that's where the BNSF trails exist. And so for us, in order to use that space, we would have to, they're active. We'd have to remove those tracks or purchase them from BNSF or shift them onto private property or do something that would just be extremely prohibitively expensive, as well as the fact that the railroad has to agree to it, which we don't think they would. Looking at option C, there was also the potential that people who are riding on the east side trail could just kind of jump into the lane there and then go up to the north. The issue there is when you get to the very north end up by West Marginal Place, that constrained limited space I was talking about earlier still exists. It's very difficult there's no sidewalk on the east side. There's just a concrete barrier and the rail tracks just beyond it. So there's essentially no space for a person riding a bicycle to change direction out there. And then B is our preferred. Again, there's adequate space to have, fit our widths in there to make it a comfortable, safe facility for people who are bicycling on the corridor. Improves sight lines at driveways. One of the issues with A today is it is a narrow facility. It's difficult for people to pass each other. There are some blind driveways where the building structure comes up directly adjacent to the sidewalk edge, and so it really is a completely blind space, a blind corner. As well as the fact that if we were to improve that space to meet even our minimum dimensions, we would have to remove all of the mature trees along this corridor. So that's up to 38 trees, and then we'd have to additionally pave it, which also is a large increase in cost. So this is part of the reason why we've set it on B, along with some of the other data we've collected that we already see a lot of vehicles using that, what would the inside lane and not the curb lane today. Here's an example of what that would look like. So we would have a 2-way bike lane. It would mimic kind of a trail, essentially taking the people that are in the narrower facility with the blind driveways and the sidewalk and just moving them into that same street. So it should improve sight lines. It should improve sight lines at driveways, as well as providing, a more comfortable facility. And we can still maintain, we've got some extra room to play out there with, we can maintain extra width for freight vehicles. 11 feet is our standard travel lane width, and we have plenty of space to continue to maintain the widths that the freight providers are asking us for. In addition, I know the rendering here, it shows what we sometimes call our paint and post option. So paint on the street with a kind of a flexible post. We are definitely considering beefier designs. I think this is just kind of one of our initial look at it, but we are considering concrete barriers or planters or something a little wider to provide a more comfortable and safe space. So moving to the south, kind of getting back at that lane drop that existed today in front of the Longhouse, we'd kind of illustrated some of the concerns we have out there with sight lines. We'd shown that video from the Longhouse that shows when we have 2 lanes, you can't physically see north as a driver. It becomes very difficult to see vehicles approaching south. And so section 2 is kind of if we go with the build option for the trail, what can we do with the south space? Again, focusing on the Longhouse, focusing on the fact that we want that place to feel safe. We want slower speeds in front of the Longhouse for pedestrian safety, for visibility, and things like that. So we've got 3 different options out here. We could look at extending that proposed 2-way protected bike lane further to the south, so further to connect all the way down to the Longhouse crossing signal. Benefits of that, you get better direct bicycle access to the Longhouse, but you are being duplicative because there's already existing trail on the east side of the road. The second option would be there's existing parking in front of the Longhouse. We could extend that further to the north. The advantage is that would provide 30 additional parking spaces out here that could be used for overnight freight parking or during the day. We've talked with the port, and they do have freight providers that might be interested in using the space during the day to park some of their rigs or their cabs. It could provide overflow parking for Herring's House Park, as well as the Longhouse when we're not in quarantine. It holds about 15 to 20 events a year, and that would just provide additional space for them as opposed to having to clog up Herring House Park, or sometimes they have to rent space from there's a SPU operations center across the street. But then the issue there is if the parking utilization is low, then we may run into the issue with kind of aggressive driving behaviors where people might be passing in the parking lane or something, and we would have to take additional measures to put other types of posts or things in that space to prevent that or discourage that type of option. And then option 3 is remove the lane drop and remove the parking in front of the Longhouse and basically extend 2 southbound lanes through that area. Jumping into our preferred options. So again, this is, we are still, we're writing all your questions as we do want to hear your feedback. But we want to be honest and transparent about what we're seeing out there, where the data is pointing us, and what our preferred options are. So from our preferred option is to install a 2-way protected bike lane between West Marginal Place, the existing signal on the top, and the Duwamish Trail signal. And then in between that space, do one of the 2 options that continues to maintain a single southbound lane, to keep a single southbound lane all through the corridor. So those are options: either extend the protected bike lane or extend the parking and maintain that parking in front of the Longhouse. Why are we doing this? Why are we proposing this? I'm hearing all the comments. I'm hearing all the concerns. I'm hearing the frustration and the anger over the High Bridge. I get it. It sucks. The High Bridge is a terrible situation that we're in. But what we can see here, and what we've also been hearing from some of the comments, is that what we're seeing today is there's already some single lanes out there. There's already a single lane at Alaska Street in front of the Longhouse, and what we're seeing is vehicles generally already in a single lane condition traveling above the speed limit. So in essence, without delay today in a single lane scenario. We've done additional analysis as requested by some of the freight providers in the port to continue to look at freight operations out there, driveway operations for businesses, and what we're seeing is basically the same effect with 1 lane to 2 lanes for the most part. And again, we want to continue to point at the existing bottleneck at West Marginal Place underneath the West Seattle Bridge. We can't, if I heard one of the questions about, we need to expand capacity out there, and if we could in that area, that would be a potential, but we can't move the High Bridge structure. We can't move the railroad without years and years of coordination. We can't demolish a working warehouse and a business today. So we're really constricted by that single southbound lane there. That kind of really, again, and as other people alluded to, the capacity constraints at Highland Parkway and the Chelan 5-way. I mean, those intersections are pretty maxed out. When I stand out there and stare during the peak periods, I mean, you see all the legs of those intersections backed up. And so it's really difficult. We have tried and retimed the signals, but those are the main constraints along this corridor that really determine your travel time. And so what do we see as the benefits? So we see reduction of risk factors. We see lower speeds closer to the speed limit with a single lane. We eliminate that potential for high-speed passing in this area where we have more concerns for pedestrian access and safety and people who are biking and mobility. We continue to see improved sight lines at those driveways as well as at Alaska Street, and the ability to provide a comfortable and safe facility for people bicycling. And so, in summary, we're seeing a lot of benefits without the detractors. No one's denying that the High Bridge is frustrating and difficult and a not fun experience at this time. We see an opportunity here to provide additional benefit, provide additional safety, provide more mobility at essentially a negligible or no impact to your travel time if you're driving along this corridor, or your user experience as you drive along this corridor. It would provide a more predictable experience that you would just stay in a single lane for longer, and then you can still expand out to 2 lanes once you get beyond the Longhouse. Diving into, again, kind of more things that we have heard on this project. Lowering speeds and increasing safety and complementing systems for all the city's modes is important, but those designs should not come at the expense of the freight network capacity and flexibility. SDOT should clearly describe how they are balancing truck and car traffic in this industrial corridor with limited bicycle and pedestrian users. This is a major truck and heavy haul route in one of only 2 designated manufacturing industrial centers in the city. The Duwamish Valley neighborhoods deserve bike lanes. Bikes should be able to coexist with freight. Looking at some of the design considerations we've heard, the signal at the Longhouse should move forward for safety. Once that signal is completed, the lane reduction that is currently in place at the Longhouse should be discontinued. Vehicles currently stay in a single lane in this area because of the lane reduction at the Longhouse. If this lane reduction were not in place, vehicles would use both lanes. There's currently an area of congestion under the bridge where the lane reduction occurs. The proposed design would extend the area of congestion just under the bridge all the way to the Longhouse. The north end constraint could change in the future, ? Additional considerations we've heard, the protected bike lane needs a more substantial barrier to ensure riders are protected. Curbside lanes may assist people departing side streets and driveways who like to pull out of West Marginal Way and head south. The design should include a center turn lane to accommodate southbound left turns into Terminal 3. There should be better documentation of west side sidewalk and bike options, including the number of trees taken down, constraints, and opportunities. Back to you, Angie.
Thank you. Okay, so we have 5 people who have their hand raised. I want to let folks know we've got a lot of comments coming into the chat. I wanted to remind you of something that I mentioned at the beginning. So when you send when you write your chat, if you send it to all panelists, everybody in the call, everybody who's on, like not everybody sees it. So it needs to say all panelists and attendees if you want everyone to see what you're typing. If you send it to just all panelists, then I mean, from the SDOT folks, they see that it'll be recorded. Don't worry that it's not being recorded, but it's just how visible you want your comment to be. So I'm going to start down the list, and we have until 7:25 before we need to do a little bit of wrap up. So we'll just go through the list. Amanda, you are first on our list. So Amanda, go ahead.
Hey there. Yeah, so I have a couple questions. I mean, I'm definitely in support of safe crossing and the signal and crosswalk in front of the Longhouse. I was just wondering when the projected or the planned start date for any, sounds like you're doing the cross signal first, which is great. And then removing the existing lane afterwards, but when is the projected start date for construction and the projection for construction length in completion of whatever project may be?
Sure. So we do have a quick slide on that, but the signal is anticipated to be built in August of 2021. And the sidewalk work, we're hoping to complete that shortly in the next few months, maybe May or June, potentially. Any of the proposed designs, if they move forward, would be installed in combination with the signal work. The signal work is by far going to have the longest timeline. Sometimes that work can take 2 to 3 weeks. They have to span wire over the rail there and everything. And so we have to get double checks with BNSF to make, as we're stringing our cable wires over there. But the bike lane and anything we do in that southbound curb lane would be relatively quick. Most likely would be a weekend work. So probably a Saturday, Sunday when we do it, when we kind of see those lower volumes. We see a dip in volumes on West Marginal Way during those periods. So that could be as short as 2 days to maybe a second weekend if potential.
Okay, great. And sorry, I have a few questions here. So what lane closures would that look like during the potential 2 to 3 or longer weeks when you're going across the rails for electrical, for the light installation? How many lanes would that shut down during construction for those 2 to 3 weeks?
It would probably only shut down a single lane at a time while they have a bucket truck out there stringing things across. Again, we have potentials. We'd probably look at night work and other options out there when we see some of the lower peak periods. I don't have the greatest details on that yet, but we definitely would be mindful of the volumes out there. We wouldn't be restricting, shutting down the whole road. We'd be doing it kind of more surgically.
Okay, and I just wanted to really clarify, I've been looking at this project for quite a while, that this is only proposed from South Idaho Street to the south end of the Duwamish Longhouse, correct? This is the only affected and changed area and currently proposed, and if a bike lane were to go in, would there ever be potential for a continued extension of that for the remaining southern length of West Marginal?
At this point in time, we're filling in a gap in the network between Idaho and West Marginal Place, so essentially the West Seattle Bridge. That's the gap we're looking to fill. We have no plans in the future to extend any bike facility further south of the Longhouse because there's already the existing trail we're connecting into on the east side.
Cool.
Thanks, Amanda.
Okay.
We've got Jim Jacobson next. Jim, do you want to go ahead? You got to unmute yourself. Jim, are you still with us? Jim, we don't hear you, so you might try unmuting yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go.
Good. Sorry about that.
Okay.
First off, I'm not against the proposal. I am against the timing. I think that there's no reason that cannot be delayed for 6 months to a year. And as far as the speed limits are concerned and the frustration with the drivers, there is that for sure. But whatever you do here is just going to pass that frustration down the road somewhere else because they're still going to speed. It's just going to be on another road. And as far as accessing the right road, as opposed to or the center lane as opposed to the curb lane, because most people are turning left to go on to I-5 or that direction, that's why everybody's in the center lane. For those people that really have to use that right lane that are going to go south to get on 509, which in our case is one of them, it's going to be a mess. So, but at the same time, not against the bicycle idea. This whole thing really to me is about the Duwamish Longhouse and bicyclists. That's what it's about. And safety is just being thrown in there. Really, that's kind of like debate. But timing is just not really good for this proposal. I live in Northwest Seattle. I've lived in West Seattle all 73 years of my life. And I just think that there are other ways to go. And as far as tree removal, just like on California Avenue, there are places the trees should be removed anyway and relocated somewhere else because there are too many blind spots and the trees are uprooting the roads to begin with. So a lot of this could be, I just think it could be held off a little bit longer. I'm all for the bicycle situation. I believe in that, but the timing, there's no reason it can't be delayed. It's going to create a problem.
Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Crystal, we have you next on the list. Go ahead and unmute and ask your question or make your comment.
Hi, thanks everybody for presenting this today. I primarily drive on this route because I don't feel safe biking at all. I wouldn't kind of know where to start without these connections in place. So I definitely am in favor of these improvements. In regards to the extension of the parking or bike lane in front of the Duwamish Longhouse, I just want to reiterate that the Duwamish people should have a lot of say in this. We are on their land and it's really important that we consider them with this land use. I also haven't heard a lot of talk about the climate considerations or considerations for non-drivers, but there are a lot of people who can't drive and aren't able to drive for various reasons. I believe it's around a quarter of all Washington state residents don't even have a driver's license, including youth, seniors, and people all in between. So I definitely want to make sure we're making considerations for people who are often overlooked in these types of projects when it comes to use in our roadway. I'm really excited to see this connection go forward and really excited, especially if we go forward with this plan to see green transportation taking place as we are dealing with our current climate crisis as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Andrew G, you are the next person, so go ahead and unmute yourself and you can talk.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Yeah, I have just a couple of comments about this. So I bike everywhere. I don't have a driver's license. I can drive just fine. I just I've never had the financial situation or desire to make that happen. And I actually also work at the Duwamish Longhouse, so I bike along this exact stretch every day. And it's incredibly dangerous. Even biking on, I think people have mentioned that there's already a connection on 16th Avenue where it dead ends, and then you still have to go back onto West Marginal Way and then cross, and it's just kind of a nightmare. There's a lot of stretches that are really inaccessible, and so I think that extending this quarter-mile section, yeah, like it's not a zero-sum game. I think there will be benefits and maybe some cons to all parties, but I just don't see how it's a negative situation. I think it's going to decrease traffic, and you already have to merge, like other people have mentioned. The other thing I'll say is when people talk about bike ridership going down in Seattle over years, I think there's a few things you should probably take into consideration about why that might be happening. One is people are being displaced from the city all the time because of financial situations and housing, and that's kind of a separate issue, but maybe take that into account when you think about why are less people biking. And the other thing is I would encourage you to do is compare Seattle to a city like Portland. I've lived in Seattle my whole life, but I love visiting Portland because they have incredibly good bike infrastructure. It's everywhere. They have a lot of crossings over the river that goes right through the middle of the city. So it's a similar situation to Seattle, and even like somewhat similar demographics and politics there. So if you want to compare two similar cities, I think it's a good comparison. And every time you arrive at a BNSF area or a bridge and you think, damn, I wish there was you think I wish there was a bridge or some kind of connection here for bicyclists. There is, because they've built that. And there's a lot more bike riders in Portland. I think that there's clearly a way that this is going to benefit bicyclists and traffic. And I would also just encourage the SDOT people, like, thank you for thinking about this, and also especially for finally coming through on the crosswalk for the Duwamish. It's been a long time coming. It's extremely dangerous. And for those who are saying wait till another time, I mean, this is the most dangerous West Marginal Way has ever been for people who use the, who go to the Longhouse, who work there, for especially Duwamish tribal members. Like, this is the most dangerous time because of the traffic increase. So I think like keeping that right lane a little bit more free, allowing pedestrian and ADA access with the sidewalk improvements and things, these are all benefits. And if you're worried about bike ridership going down, then support good bike infrastructure, like people have also mentioned, for the climate issue. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Thanks, Andrew. Rachel, let's see, we've got about 4 minutes. So we're hoping to get in Rachel W. and Patrick O'Neill. So Rachel, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'm wondering about the railroad tracks that cross West Marginal near the Longhouse that are not connected to anything and don't get used, and they're very rough for vehicles to be driving over. Is this going to be fixed during the same time?
I think that they're going out.
Hey, Brad, let me
week.
take this one. So yes, we
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Sarah Zor from SDOT. We do have plans to repair that rail spur just south of Southwest Idaho Street, the pavement repair for the next 3 weekends. So you will see some lane closures starting Saturday, and then weather dependent to do pavement repair for that rail spur just south of Southwest Idaho Street.
Does repair mean you're getting rid of the tracks or covering them
we
up,
cannot
or just
get rid of
filling
the
potholes?
Yep, we're just going to be kind of repairing around the tracks because we are not legally able to take it out because they are owned by the adjacent land use owner, adjacent parcel owner, and they want to keep them intact still.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for the information.
Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so the last hand we have raised, and it's just about the right time for us to then move on to the wrap-up piece, is Patrick O'Neill. Patrick, go ahead and unmute yourself and you're ready to go.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, firstly, that I live on 16th Avenue directly behind the proposed changes, and I work just down the street, right on West Marginal Way in a small business park. And I think that this section in particular, I don't know if people realize that there are neighborhoods that exist on 18th Avenue, 17th Avenue, and 16th Avenue, in addition to the pretty heavy concentration of local businesses. And certainly the consensus for all of us who live here is that the right lane is actually very important to allow us to access our neighborhood and our livelihoods without worrying about being run into by traffic on the road. I can also confirm that, yeah, the Duwamish Bike Trail does in fact run down 16th Avenue directly in front of my house, in fact. And I'm wondering why there hasn't been more of a proposal to improve it where it already sits off of West Marginal, keeping bikers out of the heavy traffic on the road rather than attempting to put them really in the path of heavy industrial traffic.
Thanks, Patrick. I think, so I want everybody to know that all the comments and all of the questions and the chat, all of those things are being recorded. And so we're gonna have a summary and be able to share those, the comments and the thoughts and the questions with folks. So just wanted to make sure that you all know that just because you can't see us writing things down, that is all happening. Sarah, are you in a good non-echoey spot to?
Yes,
I
think so.
Okay.
Sorry
Great.
about that, everyone.
Brad, maybe you can go to the next slide for us.
So we did want to remind people that we are still in the midst of our engagement, and we do have a business survey out there because we really want to make sure we're touching base with the businesses that either rely on the corridor or are very on the adjacent side of the corridor, on the west side where this project is being proposed. So please, just a reminder to fill out this business survey. And if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the decision-making process actually will happen. So as you can see, we're kind of in the midpoint of our engagement push for Q1 2021. So we're in our public meeting right now. We've heard from you guys, as Andy just said. We will be compiling all the comments that we've received, including the chat, and put that up on our website so you can see follow-up answers to that and see how we're using your data. So what we plan on doing is doing more follow-up with businesses, kind of compiling that feedback, doing additional analysis or documentation that we have talked about, Brad has talked about during this presentation. And then we will write a decision memo for SDOT leadership. So that would incorporate all the feedback we heard tonight. I think some good portions of what we heard tonight was especially surrounding timing of some such proposals. So how should this project be implemented, or if and when it should be implemented? So that's something that will definitely be in consideration for as we continue the design process and the engagement process moving forward. We do hope that our city leadership will make a decision in Q2 of 2021. And like Brad said, you know, we are definitely building that Duwamish Longhouse signal and crossing treatment in the west side sidewalk. Those projects are definitely moving forward in 2021. The things that we will be writing the decision memo about is what we do with that proposed space, the 0.6 of a mile, that outside curb lane, southbound curb lane on West Marginal Way. That is really what we're going to be focused on that decision memo, because that interim signal at the Duwamish, the crossing and the sidewalk will be built in 2021. In conjunction with that, definitely we'll get into construction impacts of that Duwamish signal, and we'll definitely make sure that the SDOT leadership and city leadership really has a good sense of all the things that we're hearing about as they make this decision. So thank you all so much for coming to our virtual open house. This is one of our first ones I think we're able to do virtually. So thank you for your patience in our technology, as well as the videos we showed. And look forward to having some more input from our website as we compile all the feedback we received tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time. And if you have additional feedback or questions, you can email us at westseattlebridge@seattle.gov. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. I think we're good. So we will be ending the webinar in just a moment. We'll have our host end it, but we'll leave up this slide for just a minute so that you can write down the website if you need it. And then we'll go ahead and close out the webinar. Thanks so much for your time.